long time no see. So this is kind of interesting. This here is a Rigidbot, basically about like 10, 12 months ago, I backed Kickstarter for a 3D printer, and here it is. So I figure I'll put it together and probably time-lapse it, because I don't know, I like time-lapses. Also kind of do a mini capsule review. A decent sized box. Can't have styrofoam. This is I was kind of drawn to this one for a number of reasons. Predominantly that they seem to have figured out that making a CNC device of any sort out of wood is, you know, maybe not a good idea, you know, because it's a terrible idea. So this it's predominantly metal. It's also let's see, it was $535, and it's got a 12 by 16 by 10 build environment, which is kind of impressive. So, ooh, lots of little bits. So, steppers. This looks like a controller with a little fan vent on the back. Stuff for the print head. Whole bunch of documentation. It's got mostly plastic. It's plastic with metal rails. But you know what? It's not. What is it not? It's not wooden. So I think I'm going to be okay with that. Huh. Even more fittings. These are nice. They're all plastic fittings, but they have brass inserts that they then injection mold over, which is kind of nice. Apparently they felt the need for stickers. That's nice, cable lumen. Oh hey. Whole bunch of linear bearings. So this is one of the nice things about this, which is like the Z-axis. It's actually driven using Acme lead screws rather than kind of belts or just random threaded rod. These are actual, like, proper steppers with, you know, actually it looks like it's all just a single shaft. They machine the Acme lead screw down and they use it for the stepper shaft. Quite nice. There's 5 steppers in here in total. Comes with some filament. It's like the styrofoam kind of had a rough time of it. It looks like this was the cubby for the styrofoam, or the supposed to fit in here somewhere, I guess. I guess that's what this was. Whoops, somebody didn't think very well. There's a big packet of silica in there. Now we get to the stuff that's interesting, because it's aluminium. These are just plastic. So this, I believe, is the build environment bed. That is nicely sized. I am pretty happy about that. So that's your build bed. That's frickin' giant. Like compared to the little rep wraps and shit with just a little bitty bed. It's like, oh yeah, yeah. It looks like this. I would assume that's the thermistor on the back, and then you have power connections over here. They're just using it's just a serpentine copper trace for the actual power element, which is kind of funny. It looks like just, well, there's a bunch of LEDs on the back, which is kind of interesting. I guess this thing lights up, but it looks like, I would assume there's a power rail around the outside from the look of the traces, and I think the power rail around the outside, and then the bottom side is a solid copper plane, which I think is the other terminal. Also, as is common for all sorts of boards with an extremely heavy copper covering on one side and a lot of etching on the other side, it's tacoed a little bit, but that's totally acceptable. And it looks like, I bet it bolts to this, which is 1/4 inch aluminium. That That is substantial. That is not a little piece of metal. So I bet that'll flatten it out. And then we just have a whole pile of rails. Here are my linear bearing slides. There's some of them at least. And then in the box is just a whole pile of metallic, basically just powder coated metal extrusions. I think they're steel. They might be aluminum. Yep. I am going to do something rather unbecomst of this, which is read the instructions. So problems, I has them. So this is the drive gear for the extruder, and it's finally. I just spent like 15 minutes lapping it, trying to open up the bore with some wet dry paper wrapped around a little fine screwdriver, because it was too small in diameter to fit over the shaft, just barely. Looks like it's now opened up enough that it's actually, ooh, wow, it's stiff again. Let's see, it's a line there. Hold the keyway. It looks like, I think when they drilled the hole for the keyway, they pushed a burr in or something. Also, it appears the way the manual tells you to install it is backwards. Wow, that's really stuck. I think I'm installing it the way the manual tells you to. well, as you can see, I've got it working. It seems like there are a couple problems. Filament dimensions were wrong, and I switched software. I was using Cura, and now I'm using Repetier Host. Yeah, I'm not entirely certain what was going on. Just cranky. Also, one of the problems is the bed is very difficult to level. It's just too large. It actually changes topology as it heats up and cools down, which is troublesome. So what I did to get this print to work is I basically just said, okay, fuck it, I'm going to turn it on and level just the little section where I'm printing, and to hell with the rest of it. And that seems to have helped a lot, because as long as it's level locally, I don't care about the rest of it. I might see if I can like track down like a sheet of 1/2-inch glass that'll act like a much better bed. But yeah, so it seems to be working pretty nicely. One of the problems I've been having is these connectors. They used like really cheap connectors for the cables, and the connectors for the heater leads it's been extremely unreliable. It's been like disconnecting and redisconnecting, and I had to wiggle it to get the heater to come back and stuff like that. I'm probably going to replace all, at least the heater leads and the thermistor lead connector with a better connector at some point. Especially for the heater, because that's probably several amps, and I doubt that that connector is rated for more than 500 milliamperes a pin. Basically just, excessive cost cutting. But yeah, so cool. There you go. Seems to work pretty well. I still think I'm running it a little bit too fast. I think my filament feed rate's a little higher than it should be per se, but I don't really mind. That just means I get, I use a little more filament and it kind of bulges out around the edges on the top level, but frankly I'm more or less okay with that. It means the layers are very well adhered. Let's see, where is it? I printed out a here's my 20 centimeter or 20 millimeter by 20 millimeter calibration cube. This one's hollow, which is what the top is dished in, and it came out pretty well. It's supposed to be 0.787, and it was 0.795, so it's a little tiny bit over. I might tune that down a little bit. And also there's a very minor lip right at the top edge here. So basically I think when it was making this final surface pass, it just extruded a little too rapidly, and it just kind of blurred over. But yeah, went together. So I'd be printing, yo. And I definitely do like the LEDs under the heating bed. They're very nice, but with their flashing and shit. So a bunch of adjustment later, different computer I'm running it with. It turns out that the reason I was getting terrible surface effects that I was getting previously was because I had accidentally misconfigured the filament to be calculated as 1.4 millimeters in diameter. So other stuff, this is my new shop, which has kind of been one of the reasons I've been not talking too much recently. Put in LED lighting. So I actually have a workshop. I'm going to try and get a Bridgeport, I think. But yeah, so it's working much better. I'm not getting this horrible corrugated surface finish I was getting previously, which was just due to it feeding far too much material. The blue tape turns out to be really important. Without it, I don't get any adhesion to the bed. I'm using Repetier as the software. I had some problems with the board. I actually had to reflash the firmware, and it fixed all the weird issues I was seeing. Go figure. That laptop's just acting like a webcam, so I can keep an eye on it from inside the house. But yeah, I'm pretty happy about it. I'm actually printing a spool holder for the spool, so you can kind of see it's just a little, it's just like a little open structure that fits inside and just lets the spool run more easily. So yeah, on the whole, I'm pretty happy with it. It seems to be a pretty decent piece of kit. Definitely some issues. One of the things I saw is some of the screw holes were not very well threaded, and actually some of the screws are a little loose. I should probably put a nut on the inside, but the plastic fits snugly enough that it's not really an issue. Another issue I had is that I think if you just add a little bit of force, and it takes some force to mate, you can plug this connector in upside down, which appears to have not damaged anything, but sure gave me a scare. This is their great big 400 watt power supply brick, which is kind of hilarious, mostly to run the heated bed, because it's a big piece of area. I also had issues with the defaults for the rapid for the Y, which is this direction, were too high. The ones in Repetier and it uses slicer. So what would happen is when it tried to make an extremely high speed 130 millimeters millimeters a second or inches per minute, I don't know, wrap it in this direction, it would drop steps and then the whole thing would be skewed. I actually have a, yeah, so that made that happen where you can see it kind of started dropping steps and then started trying to print half an inch, you know, off where it was previously. So this was my first prototype, and that was when I'm like, okay, maybe I have to turn down the rapids. But yeah, other than that, it seems to work pretty damn well. I am quite happy. I've added some grease to the Y-axis or the Z-axis lead screws. I just had some lithium grease in a grease gun floating around, and I just squirted some of that on there and just kind of went smoosh. I should actually run them up and down. They do squeal a little bit. Motors are running pretty hot. I'd say around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, like 70 degrees C, but I think that's within the acceptable range. One problem I have had is the connector. These connectors they use, particularly this connector here for the heater on the extruder, is shit. This is a terrible connector, and they're running way too much power through it, and every time I turn the system off and then turn it back on again, I have to go and fidget with the connector to get it to make connection. I'm going to put a different connector on there. And that's really kind of my only real problem with it at this point. Just these kind of style connectors in general, they have some of them over here. These little, what is it? Yeah, these things. These are just shitty connectors in general. They're just kind of horribly unreliable, and I don't really like them. So I may try and replace a lot of them, or all of them if I can. But other than that, yeah, I mean, seems to be printing quite nicely. And I definitely like the LEDs. I took the control board out of the case just because I was poking around. I wanted to make sure it was working, and you can't see any of the nice LEDs on it when it's got the when they put the cover on it. You can't see any of the LEDs. You can't even see the serial activity LEDs, which are kind of useful. And it was not responding for some reason. That was before I reflashed it. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's a pretty cool 3D printer.